Montgomery went back to campus today. Prince George's students return to their classrooms tomorrow. With the new school year comes the chance for some critical re-examination of public education. And frankly, there is no one better to give us a big picture look at public sector education reform than our next guest, David Osborne. He's out with a brand new book, simply entitled Reinventing America's Schools. No big deal there. David, it's good to have you along.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us. You are here in a place that is prominently featured in your book because of what has happened to DCPS, the District of Columbia Public School System. It's one of the case studies that you have.
Right.
And it's nothing short of reinventing itself. When the economic problems hit the city, so did the educational problems. It was an opportunity, though, to kind of change things, and change it. It has been.
Yes, and it's one of the fastest improving school systems in the country. You know, it was at the bottom 10, 20 years ago, but you know, the instrument that really forced change was charter schools. Congress created this charter school board. They began chartering schools, and you had all of these creative, innovative schools coming up, and parents started to flock to them, and that competition kind of forced the folks who ran the district to make some big changes.
This was in every sense a laboratory, because along with all that innovation, nothing is a straight line. There were you made advances. You also had some reversals as well. Have they learned the lessons from the failures and improved upon the successes in your view?
They've learned a lot of lessons. There's been you know, people say that the charters don't collaborate with district schools. In DC, that's not true. There's been a ton of collaboration. People move back and forth between the sectors. There are joint initiatives. But there's one big nut that DCPS has not cracked, and that is those schools that are full of poor African-American kids, particularly in wards 7 and 8, the poorest wards.
Yes.
The charters, some of the charters, this is very difficult. I'm not criticizing DCPS for this. It's really hard. But some of the charters have figured out how to educate those kids effectively. And the district really needs to turn to that sector and, you know, do some kind of partnership. A lot of districts are doing this now.
Indeed, there are a lot of places that are looking to the District of Columbia to see how it's worked there and maybe if they can improve upon it. It's interesting to look at the lists of well-performing public school systems, and I know that educators as a rule don't like those lists, but they at least provide some sort of a basis for comparison, and many of them have found great success with this whole thing of charter schools, of taking not just the best, but taking a lot of people and changing how they're instructing the various subjects.
Yeah, I write about 3 cities in depth in this book. The first is New Orleans, which after Katrina, the state took over most of the schools, gradually turned them over to charter operators. And it's clearly the fastest improving city in the country, if not in American history. No one disagrees that it's the fastest.
They effectively had to start, though, from ground zero, though, because Katrina washed away their school system.
All but about 15 schools.
Yeah.
It did, yes, absolutely. I also write about DC, of course, as we said, and Denver. And interestingly, of the 3, Denver's the one with an elected school board. And they made a decision about a decade ago that the district was near the bottom, and some of these charter schools were knocking it out of the ballpark. And they said, you know what, let's give them buildings, let's give them equal funding, let's embrace them, let's expand them, let's replicate them, let's make them a core of our strategy. And they've become one of the fastest improving in the country. So what's happening is we have this outdated way of organizing public education that goes back 100 years, and gradually we're reinventing it sort of by the seat of our pants from the bottom up in cities like DC, like New Orleans, like Denver, like Indianapolis, and I could go on because it is spreading.
Fascinating look at education, public education in America, and how the District of Columbia has had an important role in changing how we think about that education. Reinventing America's Schools. David Osborne, the author. Thank you. Good to have you here.
Thank you.
When we return, some world news for you, and 2 countries have laid out their thoughts on the